Once you've ruled out the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be true.
And it is not a question of a little occultism or a touch of mysticism, Mr. Denton. It is vampires, and there's a host of damned souls at Pelopous.
I am thy father's spirit, doomed for a certain term to walk the night.
Here, the old gods aren't dead.
And what of the true god?
He's dead. Can't complain.
People assume that time is a strict progression of cause to effect, but actually, from a non-linear, non-subjective viewpoint, it's more like a big ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
You're listening to Paranormal UK Radio.
Hi everybody, this is Irene Allen Block, the host of the Paranormal UK Radio Show, the flagship show to the Paranormal UK Radio Network. And I've forgotten who I'm with. I shouldn't do this on Scotland.
This is the second show in a row you've forgotten me. You know, you see...
It's not that Mark Johnson, everybody, Mark Johnson.
Oh, why, thank you.
Isn't it? Honestly,
I feel honored you remember.
Yeah, well, but, you know, this has been going on for 10 years. But for some reason... the powers to be block me when I come to introduce you. So why are they doing it? Capisco?
Maybe I'm going by a different name.
Makes you think.
On another dimension, and it's screwing you up.
Yeah, it could be.
Could be. Or they just like messing with you. Who knows?
I don't know. But, you know... I do get your name sometimes. I think it's because I like the words and the name Markle Farkle. So when it comes to introducing you as Mark Johnson, my brain wants to do, or my mouth wants to do it as Markle Farkle. So
I never should have ever told you that.
Then my brain blocks, sweetie. It literally cuts off because it can't cope. It knows it's Mark Johnson, but the mouth is coming out with Markle Farkle.
Okay. Well, now that we have that out of the way.
Yes.
Like I said, never should have told you my aunts used to call me that, but...
No.
Oh, good Lord. So, what's new here? What do we have going on?
You're coming to the UK.
That's right.
Oh, God.
Finally.
He's coming, people, to visit me here in the UK.
Now here...
Staying with me and touring about for a couple of weeks.
With you and Brian and your sons and meeting many of our other radio shows hosts here on the station who live over there, so...
Yes, hopefully they'll be coming to stay at my house as well. So if I haven't got enough beds, I'm going to put them on the floor.
There you go. As long as the ghosts don't step on them.
Yes.
Well, this is what's really ironic. We have been working together for well over 10 years, and we have never met in person. So,
well, this is it. We've done radio programs,
publishing. You know, we've done.
Unknown Origins Radio.
Paranormal Investigations with SRI. I mean, we have done so much together, and yet we've always been separated by an ocean.
Thank God.
Yeah, well, you're going to have me for a week, so...
No, nearly 2 weeks.
About 10 days.
Wow.
Yep. So you're stuck with me.
If we get bored over here, we can always hop a plane and fly over to Italy.
You know, we could. And I wouldn't complain.
Neither would I.
Oh, good Lord. Well, I'm looking forward to it, so.
Oh, I'm glad someone is. That's okay.
Fine.
Meow.
Well, since you're going to be so snarky, we might as well get on with the show then.
Yes, we have a lovely gentleman. Who is it, Mark?
Yes. Well, our guest tonight is Adam Gell. Now, Adam is a retired high school physical education teacher working in the public school system for over 30 years. He also worked as a landscape photographer, writer, documentary filmmaker, and he currently hosts his own podcast. Now, what I'm really fascinated with Adam is the fact that he works with the Akashic Records, and he does past life regressions and healings, and he's a Reiki practitioner and mentor. So, Adam, welcome to the program.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Hello, Adam. Adam, can you explain about the records for people that don't know anything or have never heard of them?
Sure. Well, the Akashic Records are an energy field, and it's a vibrational library, located in the fifth dimension, and not an actual physical library, but it contains all the information of the universe from all beings from the beginning of time and space. It's referred to in the Bible as the Book of Life. Edgar Cayce, who was the sleeping prophet, used the Akashic Records to access information for his clients while he was sleeping. But many people who read the Akashic Records wind up accentuating their spiritual growth, their healing, wisdom, and development, personal development, by accessing the information from this energy. Just on a quick note, the energy itself is in the fifth dimension. It's a vibrational field that we access. In Hindu, it's called the ether. It's the space between space that records all of our actions, all of our the verbal things we speak, things we act, and the things we think. They vibrate into the Akasha, and they get stored there.
Okay, lovely. Mark?
Well, first of all, my first, because actually I want to touch on that one. I want to get back to that because I have an interesting question for you. But let's get to the beginning. After all your work in the school system and all the other things that you've done, how did you get involved in becoming a Reiki practitioner and then working with the Akashic Records and doing healing and shamanic soul retrieval and all of that?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I think once we enter the rabbit hole of expansion and raising our level of consciousness to a higher level, I guess there are certain things that come in our path that either we take as victimizing ourselves with, or we learn to grow from those experiences. And that's what happened to me. If you look at my childhood, there was traumatic experiences that existed. I overrode those by, being physically active and dealing with them when I needed to. But as I got older and I recognized I was working in a school building, and every time I'd enter the gym, I would develop these asthmatic symptoms. And I saw doctors, and they took care of it in a conventional medicine, way. But as I further was investigating, one of my coworkers who came up to me said, "Why don't you go to this friend of mine?" And so at that point in my life, the only holistic approach that I really understood or knew was acupuncture and acupressure, which I used years before that. But as it related to anything to do with energy or anything outside of the body, that wasn't something that I, didn't see, was usually probably something that I would have either questioned or maybe turned away from. But to make a long story short, I visited this person who I called up on the phone, and without me saying anything, the person said to me, "You have asthma." So right there, I knew that there was a psychic connection, or there was the person being able to access my energy. As it turned out, as I was visiting this person for over 6 years, my intuition developed, my connection to the spiritual world became larger, and my ability to do energy work and help other people expanded. And so one thing led to another, where the person was telling me about my past life, and that led to then me seeing more of the potential or the soul's development, not just in this particular life. And then when I went from there and I saw that the Reiki, which this person was using on, to help me, had worked, then I recognized that I had the potential to learn something and develop something that would assist other people. And that wound up expanding itself from Reiki to the Akashic Records. So the Akashic Records, by the fact that the person told me about a past life, Sometimes there are synchronized events in our lives where we just meet certain people, or we read something, or a person enters our life and, pushes us further on our path. And one of the books I read was a book by the name of One True Love by Gabrielle Law, who was an Akashic Record teacher. So I had a reading done with her. And the reading, elaborated on my past life in terms of how it was affecting me today, and some of the issues that I was dealing with, my breathing issues, some of the physiological things, psychological things, were all tied to a past life in Germany during World War II. So I'm leaving it at that in terms of expanding upon where you left off with asking me, if you.
No, actually, no, that's fine. That's getting right into it. Now,
okay.
Before all of this started to happen in your earlier life, did you have any types of experiences that were out of the ordinary? Anything that would give you a hint of what you would be working with eventually as you got older?
I would say that I always had an intuition, a knowing. Certain times I would just say things, and I knew what people were feeling. It was an unconscious voice that existed, that wasn't right directly in front of me per se at that moment, but it would either happen or I was onto something with understanding. I guess what people were thinking, what their motives were in terms of from their thinking, or the unspoken word, which was felt like in a vibrational way, an energetic way, which made it a little bit draining for me because I didn't understand it at the time. I thought it was just me being sensitive, overly sensitive to things, and not understanding that there was energy being emitted from people, and how it can affect someone's energy field and affect, being in the vicinity of them. And so
you just described me.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a lot of people.
Yeah, you described me, but when I tried to tell anyone about it, they don't believe you. They just don't believe you,
Well, right.
Until something happens, and then I can turn around and say, "I told you so, Mark." Yeah.
The main thing that I've recognized as I travel on this path, I have a service what is called Soul Prints, where I read the fingerprints of a person, which categorizes people into specific schools of life, and what lessons that a person will go through. So for me, for example, my lessons in terms of life were actually to find my life's purpose of healing and helping people, which is where I'm at now. And what are some of the symptoms to get a person up that path is having trauma, feeling the problems of other people. Yeah. And many times what we do is, instead of taking the proactive steps and going forward with it, we victimize ourselves by saying, poor me, poor me, poor me. And what that does is that never gives us the opportunity to spring out of the gate in order to find who we're supposed to be.
That's
so I would
true.
say, yeah. So I would say throughout my life, there's been always these moments of me having the potential to be victimized, which was supposed to spring me to actually take action, to find my own power. Yeah.
Interesting. How do you know this is can be found on the fifth parallel? Fifth dimension.
Well, in terms of scientifically, if a person is in their left brain, right? Albert Einstein tried to find a scientific explanation for the Akashic Records, and he made a discovery that space exists between the smallest particles of atoms, and he called that space the four-dimensional continuum. And then there was a Nobel Peace Prize candidate named Irvin Laszlo, who's a scientist, who validated the existence of the scientific view of the Akasha. He called it an interconnecting field of information that like interwebs every atom and cell, and that connects everything. And it responds to human emotion. And as he said, the field is accessible. So, yeah, and science has somewhat of an inkling or an understanding of the quantum field.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Don't you think so, Mark?
Yes. And
this is similar to what I was telling you earlier on. I see it in my head like a big spider's web.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And, there's... Oh, God, I'm tongue-tied now. Because I had one experience And I've mentioned on the show before, I'll keep it brief. I had one experience dealing with the Akashic Records about 15, good Lord, more like 18 years ago. Because I was working with shamanism, and I did take training as a shamanic practitioner. So that's something else I want to talk to you about later on.
Right.
I was doing a shamanic journey, and I wound up in, to me, what looked like the Akashic Records. And it's how you would imagine it, is like the big, giant library, big columns, huge, bookshelves, whatever, going up, like hundreds of feet, and it's books and scrolls and everything. And in this vision that I had, I went over to this tiny little section that was me. And like, I had like barely one part of a little shelf, but there was still a lot on there. But I pulled 2 scrolls out, and not opening up and reading them, just pulling them out and then automatically getting information on 2 past lives. One was a man of power, and one was a woman of servitude. And what I took away from that was a balancing, bringing balance to my life in many different ways, including balancing the masculine and feminine energies, balancing just life itself, different experiences. And that was 18 years later. I can tell you that is exactly what I needed, and I had to work on for a number of years. So that's my only real experience with it. But then you mentioned something earlier about how, let's say someone has, and we've done some shows on near-death experiences, some people who've had a near-death experience, and then when they cross over, and one of the things that they all experience is the life review. And it goes over their entire life, every single thing in their life. Now, would you say that is a point where they're accessing the Akashic Records to bring that information out?
Yeah, I would definitely say that. I mean, it's the place located in that 5th dimension. It's the place where we're dreaming. It's the place where we're where our ego is out of the way, so to speak. Gives us that that access point, that information point, which, as you say, in terms of reincarnation, of coming to the life review, that's also located in that same plane. Yes. So when we're accessing, when we're in that area, we're actually revisiting past karmas and through astral incarnations.
Wow.
I don't know if that answers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. The information, when we talk about the Akashic Records, in fact, Irene and I were having a conversation about this before the show. Most people tend to think of it as being like this big library, or even, as the Bible mentioned, the book of life, so a book with all this information. But all are really metaphors for something that really can't be described in the physical. It's accessing certain information. And I've always felt that that's something that part of our higher selves comes through, that already is in contact, in touch with all of that information. When you mentioned Edgar Cayce, who would go into trance and he would channel his own higher self that was connected with the Akashic Records and connected to all that information. And I feel like all of our higher selves, to one degree or another, is connected to that. Or I should say they all are connected to it. It depends on how much of that filters through down here.
Well, I think it's also our connection, our vibrational, footprint that we give off in terms of how we vibrate. Many times when people access the Akashic Records, they can receive a feeling in their body, and then they may not exactly see things or hear things or access any further information. But most of the people will. Most people will actually, once they open up the Akashic Records, see information, hear information. It's not a library per se, as you mentioned. It's more of a place, just like a book, where we store information, where we write notes, or where information is recorded. And so that's where the word book of life or book would come from, where we record our deeds and our actions and the vibrational footprint of our lives.
So with the Akashic Records, what are ways that we can access those Akashic Records?
Well, the Akashic Records, from my not in my interpretation, from the way I access it, is through a sacred prayer. And the prayer itself was handed down by the Mayan tradition to a Spanish woman who, by a dream from a man by the name of Johnny Prozenska, he had a dream of this woman passing the information down to him, the sacred prayer, and he met the woman down the street, and she gave him the prayer. And this happened in Mexico, and it was a very interesting thing. So in terms of my way of accessing the Akashic Records is through a sacred prayer that allows the 8th chakra, which is about 12 inches above my crown chakra on the top of my head, to be in a state of receiving and to be able to then access information based upon what I hear and see, but also based upon the questions that a client would ask me in terms of what they're trying to develop or what they're trying to see or understand in their lives.
Now, how do the records, how do they assist you on our soul's journey?
Well, in terms of the way they assist us is because it allows us to have a soul connection, to allow our soul to hear information. It pushes aside the ego mind, which will then, that chatter that will get in the way and create structure and want to receive yes or no information, which is ego satisfying. But what the Akashic Records does is the prayer itself allows the soul to then step forward for the person. The masters and teachers who guide the person, they are in contact with the higher self of the person, the soul, and that soul then passes on information to a person's life. It gives them access point. It helps them develop their a deeper connection to spirit, to a more profound way of developing from a spiritual sense, from the soul level, which is our true essence and our true purpose. And so accessing the Akashic Records will help a person's soul develop on a deeper level and expand more.
Adam, is it this prayer? It's not a prayer like you say in church, surely. It's more an affirmation.
It's a prayer. It's an access prayer that changes the vibration of the energy.
Like an affirmation.
I wouldn't call it an affirmation. I would call it asking or receiving.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's more of an asking and receiving type of information as opposed to an affirmation of just saying something with positivity and strength or, internal knowing. It's asking for the guidance and protection from the universe when accessing this information.
Okay. Yeah. That's interesting. Very interesting. Because, anybody that I've spoken to about this before, they usually say, well, you say with your intention what you want to know, and the answer will come back to you.
Right. Well, yeah. Well, intention is manifesting. And first off, many people are a little bit, sometimes they're stuck in their ego mind, not knowing what their true purpose is and not being able to look at the traumas that they've experienced and really deal with them and push them aside to some extent so that they can really grow from the experience by using that as a springboard. Many times we distract ourselves, we run away from the parts of ourselves we don't want to know, and we want to just satisfy ourselves with external pleasures or materialism so that we don't have to deal with the inner world. So the Akashic Records is usually an energy that will give information that will help a person get in touch with their soul's purpose and also have them develop their internal world to a greater extent. And also to reveal past lives and the themes the themes that we've been living and need to overcome in our present reincarnation, so that we don't repeat the same issues, and that we grow from the past lives' experience and the present life that we live in. So the information that comes through from the Akashic Records helps a person on a soul level, and that's the true personal growth, in my opinion.
Yeah, the people that I've ever been connected with that say that they access the records, they've all been humble people.
Yeah,
have you found that? Then they're people that don't have an ego.
Well, I think we all. I understand what you mean. We all have an ego, and we need
a big ego.
Yeah, well, it's a natural phenomenon, but I think that when we're in the ego state, we're less receptive because we feel we have to do things on our own. We feel like we don't have a connection to spirit, that we're not guided, that whatever fails, it's our fault, or whatever we succeed at, it's our doing. And while that's true, there's also support from the spiritual world that guides us and gives us information that helps us. And so when we're in an ego state, we're less receptive, and we have less of an ability to then access information that will come in from the intuitive side of us, or from the astral plane, from the Akashic Records. So I think when we put our ego aside by actually sitting still and listening.
Well, I think, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think that if anything of this sort that you do, you better leave your ego at the door, and, you'll get better reactions.
Right. If a person who's doing a reading for someone is in their ego, they really won't get the information from the Akashic Records.
No.
Because it'll be based upon a person actually saying, I can give you the information. I don't need anything else to support us or to get the information.
Yeah.
It becomes an energy that you feel and a knowing. And when information comes through that validates things that people are going through or experiencing, then you're in that place.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's like in shamanic circles, we call it being the hollow bone, or even an empty vessel. It's allowing yourself, putting your ego aside, putting almost your personality aside, and allowing those spiritual energies to come through and work through your body. You're not the one doing it. You're just the vessel that these energies are working through to conduct the healings or whatever it is that they're working with.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, it requires us, whether male, female, or whatever, to be able to push aside the male brain, the left brain, the structured brain, or the part of us that disconnects from the spiritual world and doesn't want to rely upon that, as I said before. So having a balance within oneself of listening with wisdom, and also deciphering the information and assisting other people, and the desire to help other people from a place of humility, obviously will give off an energy which is genuine. And when a person's operating at a place of ego, in feeling in control and not allowing themselves to open up to the true essence of the universe, then we wind up using our ego as a support system, to get by, to be right, to win.
Yeah, and I've known too many people in the past who, whether they're a psychic medium or healers or whatnot, it's all about them. It's all about them promoting themselves and trying to make a name for themselves so they could, work this full time, and not being more humble and just allowing spirit to work through them, and it not making it about them.
Well, right. I think when we, as I said before, operating at a place of authenticity and genuineness, then I think the universe supports us and gives us the guidance and timing when things come, and when people come in to assist them, and when people seek certain people to help them. I don't think people can genuinely force their way into giving information or helping people. If that's the energy, then it is based upon ego. and there's really no benefits that helps anyone because then it's controlling, and the energy is not located in the upper chakras. It's located more in the root chakra, which is control and grounding, and you need both. We need a balance of both.
Now you do shamanism as well,
Yes,
Adam?
I do.
As well as Reiki?
Yeah, well, in my shamanic work, I studied under Itzhak Berry, who's a shamanic practitioner in New York City. He's the author of, I think, 3 books. And the work that I've learned from him stems out of the Andes tradition, which is using obviously the masculine and feminine, the earth and the sky in combination, and also removing energies that don't really work for a person that are around our energy chakras or body, and clearing those energies out. And along with that, I do soul retrieval, accessing the person's traumas and seeing the parts of themselves that they disregarded from their lives in order to incorporate that back and create a sense of wholeness and wellness for a person. Most of our illnesses begin on an emotional level. When we don't deal with those traumas and we don't pay attention to them, they creep into our energy field and make us physically sick. So my shamanic work is based upon incorporating the energies of the earth and the energies of the heavens in combination, and creating a sense of balance, and incorporating the masculine and feminine energies in balance, so that a person experiences a state of equilibrium.
I see. So, with the Reiki, with this shamanism and one thing or another, bringing in the records as well, it's all kind of gels together, yes?
I would say yes. The energy itself feels somewhat familiar. I mean, when you journeying is drumming or using a rattle to stimulate a certain brainwave so that the ego then falls asleep almost like in a dream. And then the information that you're seeking for a person or for yourself then comes through. It's like the door is opened, and then the information or unconscious connection to the universe is revealed. And much of many of the sessions I have, I hear and see things in a different way in accessing that energy field. The Akashic Records is through a prayer, and shamanism is through drumming or through rattling. And there's a similar energy to that, yes.
It's like I'm a remote viewer, so if I want to get into any altered consciousness, I use I can't say the word now.
Binaural beats.
Yes.
Binaural beats, yeah.
Yes, I understand.
Which is similar to the drumming and everything that you use in shamanism.
Yep, absolutely.
Now,
fantastic.
I was trained under my teachers worked with, I don't know if you've heard of Sandra Ingerman, who's written dozens of books. And
yes.
She, I learned the soul retrieval, performed it myself, and really interesting experience with that too, because again, when you are...
Mark, sorry, what about explaining a bit about what soul retrieval is? People out there that don't know.
I was getting into that. Actually, Adam already explained a part of it.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. No,
it's true.
I get asked questions, from people like the normal housewife that's doing her washing up or something. What's that about?
Well, no, Adam explained it earlier. It's just, I'll just summarize. It's going within to find those pieces of a person who's suffered some type of traumatic event or some event in their life that almost like breaks off a piece of yourself, a piece of the soul, and it sticks it somewhere, or it's stuck in the past, or it's stuck in some level and dimension. And through this practice of soul retrieval, it's going and using your guides, traveling to whichever dimension it is, whether it's the upper, middle, or lower world, finding where it is, finding out where that trauma happened, and then bringing it back to the person so that they feel more whole. And like you said, with having, you can have many fractures, you can have dozens of fractures in your life, depending on different types of trauma or experiences you've had. And with soul retrieval, you're going to find usually what that person most needs right now. You're not doing everything at once, but what is that person most in need of in terms of healing?
Yep, exactly. Yes.
Good. I made sense.
That's very good. Excellent.
You can ask your question now, Mark.
We have throughout our lives, we become fragmented. We all have certain, aspects of fragmentation of our soul. It's like a computer disk that loses its memory, or so to speak. Or sometimes we used to have to fragment a disk or a hard drive because it becomes like separate. We experience traumas and stresses on different levels. What's stressful for one person may not be stressful for another person. But in essence, it's that feeling of wanting to leave the stress that we're experiencing. And many times in conventional medicine, it would be considered almost like schizophrenia when the soul is actually dissociated from the body and is not in reality. And it could be seen in some ways as a portion of a person's soul out of the body. And that's a normal, I don't know if it's used the word normal, but it is a response by the person to handle a situation that they no longer can deal with. So a part of them will just leave to not deal with that stress. And that makes sense because, just when a person experiences a near-death experience, their soul leaves the body because they're experiencing a high traumatic and dramatic situation where their soul actually exits the body. So in some capacity, when we're living, we experience that fragmentation of parts of it leaving, and we feel imbalanced, and we feel we're not whole. And the job of a shaman is to find those traumas that the person doesn't see, doesn't want to deal with, and to ask if they really want to incorporate that and bring that back into the body. I mean, if a person doesn't want to bring it back, then they don't bring it back. It won't be incorporated into the person's soul.
I see, yeah. What was it, Mark? You wanted to ask something.
And no, I completely forgot. So we'll.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry about that.
No, that's okay.
That's okay.
With the work that you do, we've been to your website, which we're happy to plug, which is adamgelluniversalhealing.com, and you work with people in setting up remotely, or is it in person?
No, I mean, I can do the work in person, but obviously when I'm doing Akashic Record readings, I do the readings via Zoom. Mm-hmm. Person makes an appointment, and it's an hour session, and I have my clients prepare with questions that are high-end questions, and usually then person would receive high-end information from their masters and teachers. In other words, when we ask questions in life that will I get that job, yes or no, will I get that house, or will I have that relationship, those are, as I said earlier, those are like yes or no ego-based questions. And so when a person is responding, or when they ask questions of like, what do I need to do in order to change this relationship, or what do I need to do what do I need to work on myself in order to have a better relationship, or what do I need to do to get that job? Those are the types of questions that people usually ask, or I forward them to ask questions that are geared toward that, so that more higher energy comes through, and it actually it's more of a soul information.
Adam, going back to soul retrieval, can you have that done more than once?
Well, absolutely, because each time as our level of consciousness increases, we are then become more open towards the understanding of accepting ourselves. And don't forget, most of our traumas are from childhood.
Yeah.
And those childhood traumas usually are the parts of ourselves that we leave behind. Like we can't even look at a photo of ourselves, or as a part in our lives we don't want to think about. And so the person can definitely have more than one soul retrieval, because as I just said, they'll be more accepting of incorporating the parts that they might have rejected from themselves as they go on this journey. An interesting thing that I usually tell my clients, and what I see through the Akashic Records, is to actually find a photo of the time where the trauma or stress existed. and to try to incorporate that back into your life, which is difficult for people to look at times in their lives where they weren't the happiest or where they experienced certain trauma. But when we reject that part of ourselves, we reject a portion of our entirety, and we lose part of ourselves in that process. And usually it's not ourselves who wanted to really lose part of ourselves. It's the circumstances that did it to us.
And once you've had it done, you feel whole again. You feel...
Well, it depends. Each person is different. Each person reacts different to any type of modality. But for the most part, the intention is to incorporate that back to make the person more aware of their parts of themselves that they've dismissed.
Yeah.
And to ask the higher self to incorporate it back in.
There's also, I know a lot of trauma can happen in childhood, but there's also many things we as adults can experience, some exceptionally traumatic events that could break off a part of you or whatnot, that a soul retrieval in time would be beneficial.
I revert back to most of our traumas because usually the foundation of how we reacted to initial traumas is somehow how we react to future traumas in our lives. And that pattern of how we've handled things in the past is the way we have a tendency to handle things in the future. And so from my understanding, absolutely, we're going to experience traumas in our lives. Having dismissed parts of ourselves makes it a little bit more difficult to then deal with the traumas in our adult self, having not been able to do it when we were younger, which is natural.
Yeah, exactly. And soul retrieval is just one of many different types of healings that can be done on a person, both with shamanic or using Reiki or any number of healing techniques. Depends on what the person really needs.
I also use what is known as La Limpia, which is taking an egg and clearing the energy centers around the body, through the body itself and through the specific chakras. And because since an egg is porous, it absorbs a lot of negative energy and the heavy energies of the body. And sometimes I've noticed working on clients that the egg is cracked and become heavier by picking up an energy or picking up any other energies itself. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, you've also, with your Reiki work, and you know what? I'm going to be honest with you. I can never pronounce it right. It's Reiki. I mean, what's the correct pronunciation?
I call it Reiki.
Yeah.
Reiki.
That's what I do too, but I've heard other people call it Reiki, and okay. Not sure. But now, with that type of work, as I understand it, is usually you're envisioning the energy field around a person and manipulating those energy fields to bring types of healing. Or could you explain that in a little bit better terms than I can?
Most of the Reiki work I do is distance Reiki. I'm accessing the person's energetic field through my unconscious mind, through the non-locality of the quantum field. Mm-hmm. It's setting the intention. It's breathing. It's visualizations and powerful intent. And it's remarkable how people will actually feel the connection and the disconnect when the sessions are finished. There's a feeling I usually can feel in my hands, different places from a distance. If I scan the person to see where there's heavier energies or where there's blockages. And what I incorporate is I incorporate the removal of those energies through visualizations, but also through specific chakra sounds which resonate at the same frequency as the particular chakra. So the specific chanting I use that actually dislodges because that frequency or that chant that I'm using will access that particular chakra. And also the removal through the sounds, and then incorporating and clearing out the chakras themselves, and then closing the chakras, and also using vibrational sounds as well. But in terms of the Reiki itself, the Reiki is the power of intent, and there's so many different studies that have shown its effectiveness, and its ability to actually enter a person's energetic field. I've worked with many clients, and I'm working in a specific area, and they said I felt it here, and I saw this specific color, and that's actually the colors that I'm working with the person. So it's fascinating to describe how it works. How it works, I can't really say per se, but it does have an effect.
Now, how long have you actually been working with performing these types of healings?
I would say since 2015, so about 7, 8 years now.
Okay. And now part of with your journey, and again, I'm taking a look at your bio, because there's a couple things on here that seem a little out of left field, and I really would like some more information on. Now, it mentioned something about a UFO experience.
Yeah, well, I've always had. I wouldn't say I've always had a fascination. I guess it's been an interesting path for me to uncover things in life. Like I said earlier when we first got on, that I think once you enter the rabbit hole of expansion, and once you've blown on that balloon, that's very difficult to blow up, and you blow it up, and it becomes bigger. You've already expanded, and so I think all that information then gives you this vastness of what exists that's not shown on the surface of our lives. For myself, I had maybe 2 years ago, I was on the beach here in New Jersey, sitting with my girlfriend in the chair about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It was a busy day, and all of a sudden I looked up to the right. I don't know why I looked up. I looked up, and about maybe 400 feet off the shoreline was looked like a balloon at first, but then turned into a disc, and then traveled on a 45-degree angle up into the clouds. And I was perplexed. I said to myself, is that a balloon? And I said, it can't be a balloon. First, it was hovering, and then it moved in one direction. And it shape-shifted from one shape to another, starting off like a balloon, then to almost like a flat disc shape.
I was going to say, it's not a Chinese spy balloon, is it?
No, I don't think so. No. Yeah.
Sorry, I had to get that dig in.
Yeah, I understand. No. So I had that experience of that, and nobody else was looking up in the direction. Normally, like if something would be profound, like if there's a dolphin or a whale in the water, people looking straight ahead, they'll say, oh, look ahead, and everybody's standing up pointing. But there was nobody looking up at the direction where I was except myself. So I found it rather interesting. And then that winter, I had an experience driving on the Jersey Turnpike in the wintertime, and like a blue Roman candle exploded over my car, maybe about 300 feet above the car, probably less, because I saw right out the front window in front of my car. I don't know what it was. It certainly wasn't summertime. It wasn't the 4th of July. And it was a pretty interesting and profound moment. It was a blue light that just went off right in front of my car.
It's those types of events signal to me that you're possibly involved, maybe on an unconscious level, with higher levels of entities or beings, whether they're on this, what we would think of on the spiritual plane, etheric plane, or maybe even interdimensional plane.
Yeah.
And like a lot of people who have these UFO experiences, or people we've interviewed, experiencers, abductees, and who've had these experiences, and afterwards they've also developed very high psychic abilities.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I would say that I've met people who, or I've made contact with people who are on different avenues of this thinking, who are who've said they're from different planets, and I do feel, because I've seen in my mind's eye almost, I guess, a gray shape alien communicating in some way. I don't know. I wouldn't say verbally communicating, but seeing it visually. And it's funny. I had a friend of mine who did a healing on me last 2 weeks ago, and that evening is the day before I actually had in my mind's eye as I was meditating, saw this alien face. And as he did the work the next day, he said, I see this very galactic energy around you and this alien face. And he described the face, and it was the face that I saw within me. So yeah, I as you said, I believe that there are ways for people who are on this path and developing a higher sense of consciousness or awareness to be then maybe contacted in some indirect way, whether it be me and thousands of other people or whoever it may be. I do believe those experiences lend themselves to that type of connection.
Now, you have also were or are a documentary filmmaker. Could you tell us a little bit about your film?
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in Brooklyn, and as a child growing up in Brooklyn, I grew up with a very multi-ethnic, neighborhood. Played all different types of sports. When I had my traumas and problems in my house, the first place I'd run to was my grandmother's house, and she lived about a block and a half away from where I lived. Through my childhood, I'd visit her often. She'd cook me soup or food or whatever it was, but she always wanted me to look at her photo albums. So she would take out these photo albums from prior to World War II, the war years and the years after the war. She was from the northern part of Russia, which was actually an indigenous language and culture called the Komi people, but they were part of Russia, and the letters were written in Cyrillic. So as a child, when I went to my grandmother's house, she would take out photo albums, and I would look through the photo albums, and I came across a man in a military uniform amongst people with snowy scenes and fur hats on and wintry scenes. I asked my grandmother who this person was, and she said, "This is your grandfather." And at 7, I said, "It doesn't look like my grandfather that I know." So I came home to my father and I told him, after all our little stresses that existed, I said, "Dad, I saw a picture of your father. He was a soldier." And my father said, "Leave me alone. I don't want to talk about that." So as the years progressed, I would ask my grandmother a little bit more, and I wound up finding out that was my father's biological father, who was a soldier in World War II. He was a ski soldier and a political officer in the Battle of Moscow. As it went along, I'd ask my father further questions, and all he would tell me is, "I remember now. Grandma used to show me a picture of him, and she would cry, and I would cry." And that was the end of the story. I said, "Did you know his name? Did you know who he was?" He goes, "I don't know anything about him." So from hearing that, and that was after my grandmother passed away, along with asking my father these questions, my grandmother had a box of photo albums, and at the very bottom of the photo albums that I would look through as a child to see this person off and on when I went into my grandmother's bedroom, she had diaries written that were tucked underneath the photo albums, and they were written in the Komi language, the language of her indigenous people where she came from. And I opened them up, and I saw pages with looked like tears, like that smudged the ink. And in there, I saw a death certificate of a soldier. And I looked it over, and I was able to translate it because that was written in Russian. And it explained that who the person was, the name, and where the person died, where he was killed, and so on and so forth. So to make a long story short, I wound up contacting and finding his family, his relatives, my father's biological relatives in northern Russia. I was on a website there, and I put up letters and pictures, and I found the family of my biological grandfather, and I united. I went back to Russia. I went to the mass graves, and I found his body. I found the family, and they made a big story in 2011 about my visit there, and what I did and what I accomplished. And I made a documentary film, which played in the film festivals here in New York and in Asbury, New Jersey, in 2018, 2019.
Oh, fantastic!
And yeah. So I have the film itself is on YouTube. The name of the movie is called Forgotten.
Forgotten.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Definitely going to have to check that out.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Well,
So actually I as a landscape photographer, I actually undertook this job, so to speak.
Yeah.
On a let's say on a cinematic challenge for myself. Obviously, more so to actually tell a story of how in life famous people are remembered, but the common person also suffered and had a life as well, and they need to be validated no matter who they are, and that no one should ever be forgotten. because that's when the soul is dead. When you keep a person's memory alive. So many times in families, people are ashamed or told to shut people out of the family in order to keep the peace, so to speak, or to not turn over stones that were already turned over. And a lot of information sometimes never gets through. But I viewed it actually through my own life, because I was going through a difficult divorce, and because the communication with my children broke down over a long period of time, and I felt that loneliness. I felt the forgotten feeling of being forgotten, possibly, and what happens in life if we live a life and we have children or we have people who love us, but all of a sudden, once the person's gone, we don't think about them anymore. So for me, it was very important to try to bring back the memory of my grandfather, so that his memory would not have been forgotten, and that his soul would live on. And as they say, when you heal the generation, you heal yourself, you heal the generations before you, 2 generations before you, and you heal two generations after you. And that was my intention, was to bring peace, to understand where my father's stress began and why he came home stressed from work, and really what the cause of his trauma was that he didn't know how to handle, but imparted onto me. And I think there's always someone in a family who has that capacity or desire to uncover or to be the person to question things. And that was me.
That is a really heart-touching story.
Yes.
That really is.
Fantastic. Well, I definitely want to see that film, Forgotten, on YouTube. So we'll check it out. Adam, we are coming to the end of the program here. So first of all, I want to plug your website again. Where can people go and reach out to you?
Sure. My website is Adam Gell, universalhealing.com. I offer different services. A person can, read up a little bit about it and see if they're interested. And I also have my podcast, which is Conversations with Adam Gell and Inspiring Minds.
Fantastic. And where?
Yep.
And the podcast is where, on YouTube?
Well, that's on YouTube. Yes, it's a YouTube podcast.
Okay, fantastic. Well, Adam, thank you again for coming on the show tonight. This has been very enlightening, and it's interesting when I can talk to somebody who's gone through some similar experiences. So, thank you again for coming on.
Yeah, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to share some of my information with you and the audience. So thank you so much, both of you.
That's lovely.
And I want to thank everybody else for tuning in to another edition of the Paranormal UK radio show, the flagship show here on the Paranormal UK radio network. And Irene, where can anybody find us?
Everywhere, people are everywhere.
All right, everyone, you have a great week. We will be back in 2 weeks. And so be good humans. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye.